Hey, Chicago Fire family, glad to have you here. I'm Kylen Mills and thrilled to be joined by club owner Joe Mansueto to talk all things Chicago Fire, the future of the club, and the new coaching change. First of all, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Kylen.
All right, well, we got to dive into the big news. Greg Berhalter is named as the next Chicago Fire head coach and director of football. Before we get into why he was the right fit, I want to hear more about the process. How did you approach the search for the club's next head coach?
Well, our current sporting director, Georg Heitz, came to me in August and said he wanted to head back to Europe. So as soon as that happened, we kicked off a search. And we had a tremendous amount of interest in the role. It's a very desirable role. We heard from people all over the world. And we had a pool of about a little over 80 candidates, some that we sourced and many that came inbound from people across the league, people globally, all super well qualified. And then what we did is we narrowed that to a short list of 3 candidates that were extremely well qualified. And we invited those 3 candidates for interviews. And one of those candidates was the person who succeeded in the interview process, Greg Berhalter. And I had known Greg for a long time. And so as soon as the role opened up, I immediately texted Greg and said, hey, I know you're available. We'd love to have you come interview. And he responded right away. And we got him into the pool. And then he made it to that short list. And that's how it began.
So you said that you went from 80 candidates down to 3, which sounds like quite the process, a big job. How did you go about filtering through so many qualified people who wanted this job?
It was not easy, Kylen. There were 80 very well-qualified candidates. And so we wanted really someone who had a demonstrated record of success as a manager, somebody who knew MLS, but at the same time was plugged into the global soccer world, because that's a big part of recruiting talent. Somebody who was a good leader, who had good leadership skills, could motivate and excite an organization. And then somebody who had heart for Chicago in some way, that this just wasn't another job that they were taking or doing it for the money or vacation, but had heart for Chicago, saw the potential in what we're doing, and really wanted us as much as we wanted them. And so we went through the list, we narrowed it to 3, it was hard, and we invited 3 candidates back, as I mentioned. But another factor was just the time pressure. You know, we wanted to get somebody in early because preseason starts next January, mid-January, so it's not a long time. We have to make a lot of roster decisions, and we've got to recruit talent. All of that takes time. So the sooner somebody can get in here, the better they're going to do next year.
When it comes to those 3 individuals you chose to interview, I assume this wasn't just one conversation. Like, how ongoing was this to really get to know those individuals?
I think it was mainly the interview process. You know, we asked them, what's your vision for the Fire? Mm-hmm. Why does this role appeal to you? What was critical for me was somebody who really wanted this project. They really had heart for Chicago, the potential that this club has, and really wanted to be all in on the project.
So after this all-encompassing search, global, so much interest, you chose Greg. Why was he the right fit?
Well, as I mentioned, I've known Greg for a number of years. As soon as I bought into the Fire in 2019, shortly thereafter, Greg reached out, wanted to have lunch. And so I had lunch with him. We kept up the relationship, would have lunch every so often. And from the very beginning, I was super impressed with Greg. Just his deep knowledge of the game. He's got over 30 years of experience, both as a player and a coach. So he played in Europe in the Bundesliga and the Premier League, ended his career with the Galaxy in LA, and then a coach. He coached in Europe, in Sweden. He coached in the US at the Columbus Crew, where for 4 out of the 5 seasons, the Crew made the playoffs under his leadership. So a demonstrated record of success. And then the US men's national team, what he's probably best known for. So we've seen the world of soccer from outside US, inside US perspective, just multiple perspectives. And then he's just got, again, such a deep knowledge of the game. He's super analytical, very process-oriented, methodical, a high level of drive. The guy works super hard. Then he's got great leadership skills. He's a student of leadership. He's always looking at great leaders, what he can learn from them. I was impressed, for example, he took the U.S. men's national team out to California, and they trained with the Navy SEALs. Doing things like that to really kind of uplift the players. I thought that's a great leader doing things like that. That's a guy, if I were a player, I'd want to have someone like that as a coach. And then finally, he's a Chicagoan. You know, he's raised his family here. He has deep ties to the city. He sees the potential in the club and really wants to take us to one of the top clubs in North America.
As you're talking about that future, I'd imagine a big part of this process was aligning his vision with your vision for the future of this club. So can you share a little bit about what he told you he envisions the Chicago Fire looking like under his leadership, and then how do you get there?
Our visions for the club are very much aligned. I mean, that was a key thing in bringing him on. The way he articulates it, and I agree with, is we want to have one of the top clubs in North America. You know, there's no reason we can't be up there with all the other top clubs in MLS and in North America. We have all the building blocks to do that. And he thinks we've got a strong foundation to build on. We've got the new Endeavor Health Performance Center coming online soon, so he's super excited about that. We've got our academy, which is performing very well. Our U15s won the national championship last year. We have 4 U15s on the national team. I think the next club only has 2. So a really strong academy, and all the other age groups are doing well. Our reserve team, Chicago Fire 2, just made the playoffs. And we both believe in developing homegrown talent and building that up. You can see it with our current squad, Chris Brady, Brian Gutierrez, homegrown players. We have a very rich market here in Chicago for talent. And Greg is very good at identifying talent and developing that talent. And so our visions for where we want to take the club are very much aligned.
So you mentioned that you want this to be a top club in North America. What does that mean to you?
For me, being a top club in North America means you're consistently making the playoffs and competing for the MLS Cup every year. And not only the MLS Cup, but we actually compete for 4 trophies in MLS. So it's the MLS Cup, it's the Leagues Cup, Supporter Shield, and Open Cup. So you want to be vying for those 4 trophies year in, year out. And then even more broadly beyond MLS, within North America, the CONCACAF region. So the CONCACAF Champions Cup, competing for that, being seen as a desired club to be at for players in North America and around the world, that they can come here and thrive and play their best soccer. And then finally, to have a great connection between our club and the fan base. And you see that in some clubs where there's a really tight connection and the fans come out, lift the club up, and it's truly a club where people feel as one with the team. And so really building that tight connection with all of Chicago to support the club.
One of the more unique parts about the announcement is that Greg Berhalter isn't just going to be the head coach, he's also going to be the sporting director, so you are combining those roles. Was that initially how you approached the search with that idea in mind? We
were thinking of replacing Georg Heitz as sporting director. So in our minds, we were replacing the sporting director. When we came across Greg, his preference was to do both roles. And so we called an audible, and we had such belief in Greg. And the way I look at it is I want to create an environment where he can do his best work. And if he can do his best work doing both roles, then I think that's a structure we ought to consider. And we then explored that and got comfortable with it. Frank was super excited about the prospect of bringing Greg aboard, was willing to step aside. Not only that, he went and helped recruit Greg to the role. They've been friends for a long time. And so I think everybody quickly got behind that for this person, we'd make an exception to what is the norm across MLS, as you noted, of separating these roles and having a dual sporting head, director of football, and head coach. And so I think it's more because of who Greg is rather than we set down that path initially.
Well, I'd imagine that as someone who's going to take on so much responsibility, first of all, there are advantages in that there's a cohesion in the vision, right? When the head coach and sporting director are the same person, but also becomes super important for him to build out his staff. Is that something that you had discussions with him about, or how do you prepare to set him up for success in that way?
Yeah, that's one thing he said to me right away. He said, if I'm going to do both roles, I can't work 24 hours a day. Right. I need a staff under me. You know, it's 2 full-time jobs. And so the key is surrounding yourself with talent, and he can offload a lot of those duties, but he is the decision maker. And as you pointed out, it removes that friction potentially between a head coach and a sporting head about what players to sign and movement of players. And so I can see advantages to the role, and he made a strong case for it, and we got comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else you touched on earlier were the building blocks that are already in place with this club, and that Greg was really excited about the foundation that's been built. If you can expand it all on a couple of the things you already mentioned, but also anything else that he's seen that this club is already doing that he can now utilize to move forward.
I think he was excited about Chicago as a market. We're a top 3 market. We're often referred to as the sleeping giant in MLS. New York has 2 teams, LA has 2 teams, Chicago's got 1 team. one of the biggest soccer markets in the country. So the potential in this market is huge. So that's the foundation. He sees our fan base as a huge asset. We've got a big, committed, engaged fan base. But then the other things, we've touched on some of these. The Endeavor Health Performance Center, it's coming online at the end of the year. 5.5 grass fields. Just a beautiful facility at Roosevelt and Ashland. So right in the heart of Chicago. So it's pretty rare for an MLS club to train right in a city. Talking to players around the league, they're usually far out. And then you might play downtown. And having both your stadium and your training center right in the heart of Chicago, I think is going to be a huge advantage in attracting players and making sure, this club a world-class club. And then, of course, the academy, again, I think it's performing well under Gary Lewis. I think Greg will do more to have a consistent style of play up and down the various teams, from the various earliest academy team to the Chicago Fire 2 to the first team. And I think he'll do more driving that consistency. So then players can have more fluidity, kind of moving up and down between the teams. So he sees a lot of building blocks, and he sees the ambition, of this whole organization, and he's excited about that. So a nice alignment vision, and he sees a lot he can build on, and he's all in. It's so interesting. When we signed him on a Friday, he signed his employment agreement Friday afternoon. Saturday, he was over at my house for 2 hours working on the roster. This guy is all in.
Well, we love to hear that. And as a Chicago Fire fan, I'm already getting excited for what we're going to see next season. So we got to look ahead now because 2024 is coming to a close. What are your expectations for 2025?
We're going to come back better, stronger, more competitive. This year, obviously, was a disappointment. We have high standards. We always want to make the playoffs at a minimum and be vying for championships. So next year, we'll come back bigger, stronger. We'll continue to build out the whole organization. You'll see us active in the transfer market in the offseason. One of Greg's advantages is he's got a very broad network, globally, U.S. He knows a lot of players. He's had a lot of inbound already because he's here from players. And so I think you'll see us very active to strengthen the squad, both offensively, defensively. We hope to do more with homegrowns. So, watch on that front as well. But he's eager to get in, kind of look at every facet of the organization and drive excellence in it. He's all about excellence. So he'll do a total review of the organization, performance, analytics, scouting, all of these areas. And if they're not up to his standards, he's going to raise them up. And this guy, he's got an intensity about him. And so I think everyone is, going to have to really double down, and he'll lift the performance of this whole organization.
Sounds pretty intense if he's over at your house for a couple hours right after getting the job.
I loved it.
But exactly, that's the kind of enthusiasm you see from Chicago Fire fans, so it matches what this club is all about. When we do talk about the future and really examining this organization from the top down, we got to talk about venue. When you look at the vision for the Chicago Fire, do you see this club playing in a soccer-specific venue?
That's our aspiration, Kylen. We play, as you know, in an iconic stadium today, Soldier Field. It's a wonderful stadium, but it has its limitations.
Sure.
So the main limitation is getting enough summer dates. We conflict in the late summer, early fall with the Chicago Bears. We have concerts in the summer. Those are our prime days, is nice warm days. And so conflicts with concerts and the Bears, and then also certain sponsorship categories are blocked out. So it's got its limitations. And so we aspire to have our own SoccerSpecific Stadium. So we're searching now for if we can find the right parcel of land. Would characterize our interest level as very high at having our own stadium. So hopefully you'll see news on that front in the coming year or two.
Ooh, it's a lot to be excited about. As we turn the page from 2024 to 2025, do you have any final message that you'd like to share with the fan base?
I want to thank our fans. You guys have been phenomenal, and we really appreciate all of the support coming out in the cold weather, the hot weather, the rain, the snow. You've been so committed to the club, and you've been phenomenal. So just a heartfelt thank you. We know we've fallen short this season. We take that very personally. I do, this coaching staff, all of the players. It's a collective responsibility, me more than anyone. And so my pledge to you is we're going to double down. We're going to come back. We're going to work harder in the offseason to have a much more competitive club, an exciting club that we can all be proud of, that reflects the city's values, reflects this great city of Chicago, and then is consistently vying for championships and certainly making the playoffs. And so we want to get on a path to get there as soon as we can. And as Greg puts it, to have one of the top clubs in North America. So we're going to be pushing as hard as we can to get there next year. So watch us in the offseason. I think you'll see a lot of news come out from the club that'll be exciting. And then we look forward to seeing everyone at Soldier Field in 2025.
Sounds like a busy offseason. No days off, right?
It'll be fun. Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you,
once
Kylen.
again, Fire family, thank you for joining us.